Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. It's great to have you. This is one of our episodes where we're interviewing a very fascinating guest, and we will talk about her, Cat Adamson. And of course, Brian knows much more about Cat and her former husband, who died recently, named Sailor Bob. Before we start asking questions of Kat, I want to say hello to Brian. And I know you've been a big fan of Sailor Bob, so this will probably be quite exciting for you.
Yes, very exciting for me. And I actually had a chance to meet Sailor Bob in one of his rare visits to the United States. He came to Connecticut and led a weekend, and I was able to go there and meet him. And that was really had a huge impact on me. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but I just wanted to let our viewers know that last month the world lost Bob Adamson, known affectionately as Sailor Bob, who was a teacher of non-duality in Australia. And in 1976 and 77, he spent 12 months in Bombay with Nisargadatta Maharaj, the great 20th century Indian sage and author of I Am That, which was one of the first books to bring non-duality teachings to the English-speaking world. Several years ago, as I mentioned, I had the great good fortune of meeting Sailor Bob when he held a weekend retreat in Connecticut. And that meeting and his books had a profound effect on me, including his first book, which I have always said is my favorite book title in the world, What's Wrong with Right Now, Unless You Think About It. But our guest today is Bob's widow, Cat Adamson, whom Bob asked to carry on his weekly Sunday gatherings in Melbourne. So I thought it would be lovely to ask Cat to come onto our show so we could celebrate Bob and his teachings together and introduce Cat and her teachings to our listeners. So welcome to Awareness Explorers, Cat.
Thank you for having me. It's been a month exactly today. Bob passed
wow.
away months ago. 4 weeks. February is short.
Before we started recording, we asked you, how you were. A lot of times people grieve for a long time, and you seem to be very much in the present. And I'm wondering how you can describe a little bit about what this month has been for you. I'm sure it's been a little bit intense, and I'm just curious about that.
It has certainly been different to the last few months and the last few years that I had with Bob. It's been different. But as Bob said just before he passed away, we weren't really anticipating or imagining what is going to happen when he is no more. That's not the way of leaving the message. But he wasn't worried about me at all. He said that life will continue providing, and as it always does. And he also told me, because I was his second wife, his first wife, he was 42 years with. And when she passed away of cancer, he, in his own direct experience, wasn't really grieving a loss, because what's wrong with right now unless you think about it? And if you are not in a habit of thinking and ruminating and imagining what is not happening and overlooking what is happening and really just missing out on life, then where there is any space for anything else that what is. So it has been my experience as well. I was quite overwhelmed by amount of loving care of people who I did not expect will be checking on me, bringing stuff, looking after me. That was so loving and so beautiful. Even the palliative care who was looking after Bob and I for the last couple of years, even they still in touch and call and check. That's beautiful. Plus, for whatever reason, the life is unfolding in a way that part of the dream that was somehow put aside and nothing was missing. The 9 years and the 9 days that I spent with Bob was definitely the best chapter of that whole dream that one could ever dream of. But there wasn't much of the nature of walks in the bushes, swims in the ocean. Nothing was missing. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was incomplete. But those bits and pieces of life got reintroduced. I had a girls' trip on the kayaking on the river yesterday, and well, you can't help but notice the beauty. And as Bob would always say, where would I ever go? He has not gone anywhere. The life doesn't die. Life is an energy. It hasn't gone. It is there as a thought. I'm wearing his dragon necklace. I love it. He is there in a digital form.
Mm-hmm.
He is never not here, although I can't hug him, unfortunately, but that's a problem only when I think about it. And when I am with the five senses wide open, completely engaged in the moment as it shows up, there is no space for thinking of what is not. And still, I absolutely love diving into the moments of elation, looking into the pictures, into his eyes, in the way he looked, his beautiful, persistent, all-embracing, loving look that he was sharing with the world, but with me particularly. That was his greatest gift. So yes, surprisingly, I can't say that I'm miserable. I can't say there is anything wrong. There is nothing wrong.
That is
And
beautiful.
it is just like Nisargadatta expressed it, the sense of completeness when there is no illusion of self, of separation there. The best description that he could ever offer was there is nothing wrong anymore. Whilst when you live in a dream as being individual and you experience the existential angst and incompleteness and longing, and you are torn between desires and aversions, well, everything is wrong. You believe the mind which is designed to complain. That's not happening, which is quite amazing.
That is amazing and beautiful. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind. Most of our listeners are familiar with Sailor Bob, but some are not. And I was wondering if you might maybe give a little bit of some background. I know, for example, that alcoholism was a big part of his journey. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that he got the nickname Sailor Bob because there were two Bobs in Alcoholics Anonymous, and so one was blank Bob, I don't remember that, and the other was Sailor Bob. Is that true?
Well, there was more than two Bobs. There was
There was a lot of Bob.
Malagatanga Bob, there was a tall Bob, there was a fast Bob, hotel Bob, whatever the Bobs were there. So because he used to work at sea, he got the nickname Sailor Bob, just to distinguish between the Bobs. And yes, that's true. That's how he got a nickname. And it stuck because he actually would be 65 years sober in May this year. He didn't quite make it, but 64 years of sobriety is quite impressive. And he made his name in AA, and there was a lot of recognition. A lot of people came to the memorial service to actually just bow down to that demonstration of life, of sobriety, which he was basically just, he didn't have to teach it. We were still showing up on the meetings. I was showing up. I'm not in the program. I mean, I did some Al-Anon. But we were still showing up at least a couple of times a year for his birthday and for old timers meeting, to connect with people and to really let him shine and demonstrate that alcoholism, which is a really, really tough cookie because it really rewires the brain, it kind of debilitates the impulse control network, and it is a disease that is progressive. So a lot of people, even with years of sobriety, are still miserable, and Bob was not. Bob was not, even when he had cancer, even when his mobility was taken away, his memory was fading a little bit. He was never miserable. He was a demonstration of life in oneness and joy. And boy, he was the happiest thing in the world. He was shining joy the first thing in the morning, opening his eyes and radiating that shining love. And throughout the day, up until the moment we would close our eyes, still looking lovingly at each other and just enjoying, loving to be. So he had a lot of impact on people. I think a couple of the AA members I actually requested to speak on his memorial service, which is recorded and available on his channel if anyone wants to see. The lady who knew him right after he came back from Nisargadatta, and she was the first ever who came to him and say, I like what you got and I want what you have. You're going to be my sponsor. You're going to teach me. And her babies, I mean, her sponsees, I can hear when they come and speak, I can hear Bob transmitted through Lena as the message is proliferating itself and is bringing that lightness and that relief from the suffering.
And how did he come to meet Nisargadatta?
Yeah, that's
What
another
was
good story.
Yeah? Oh, great. Shoot.
Yeah, his whole life is just so many beautiful, meaningful, and exciting stories of non-doership. Because that's the core of the message. There is no one there running the show. There is no control. There is an illusion of control by all means, but there is no person, no imagined entity that pulls the strings and does everything. It's the life itself that beats your heart. It's the life itself that expands and contracts your lungs and that provide thoughts. So Bob he was a sailor. And he met his first love, Barbara, who became later on his first wife. He was 40 and he wanted to be with her. He didn't want to be a sailor and stay away from home for a few months at the time. So he quit the job on sailing. And the sailing was quite a path because first he was in the Navy, where he started drinking. Actually, he started drinking just before. And then he got fired. He signed a contract for 12 years, but he was unmanageable. He was crazy. He was psychotic and absolutely violent and nuts. So they got rid of him. They seized his contract. They transported him in a padded cell to a psych ward from Japan to Sydney, and that was it for sailing. A few years later, he joined merchant Navy after being a shearer and working factory jobs and stuff. And then he met Barbara. She was a gym instructor and she was gorgeous, absolutely beautiful woman. And that was his first love. He was walking around her. They got married 5 years later, but he quit working at sea. She already had 4 young children. She needed someone to provide, and a sailor has a better money than the ward, what do you call it, the guard, night guard or something. So she looked around and found someone more wealthy. And Bob was absolutely devastated and ended up going to India. He went to Muktananda ashram. He knew Muktananda before as a spiritual seeker. He was into all sorts of different paths. He was with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He had the initiation first from one of his teachers, then his second initiation from himself. He also met Muktananda. He actually helped bringing him to the country. He met a lot of contemporary speakers like Douglas Harding and those guys. He was friends with them. And when you met him in Connecticut, I think he was staying with Joan Tollefson as well, a gorgeous, gorgeous, shining light.
Yes, we've had her on this program as well.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes.
Yes, so when he quit working at sea, Barbara found someone else. He ended up in India, but he couldn't put up with the energy. That was crazy. The Kundalini yoga, the women screaming in endless ecstasies, rolling on the floor. He lasted a month. And he got back to Australia and he married her. He fought back. Her first love and his only love really back then. And they got married, but it didn't last. Another year and a half, nearly 2 years, and the situation repeated. And this time, even though they were married, his life just crumbled. His greatest gift, I think, apart from being such a persistent, patient, and loving mentor who would never refuse a help, who would stop his dinner and throw everything to be at service. His greatest gift was to be a partner. He was this one-on-one oriented, the way that the life essence is just effortlessly reflected in the eye of other. It was his, what a gift. Anyway, he lost her and he went to India forever. He intended to stay, like there's nothing to come back. His marriage crumbled. She's with someone else, somewhere else. And nowhere else he could go. The only place he knew was the Muktananda ashram with the screaming, rolling people, dancing all night until you fall unconscious out of that Kundalini experiences. And there he was, and again, another beautiful gift of Bob was to be incredibly loyal. There he was doing all the seva, like in that little stories that Muktananda will tell people. I'll tell you the truth. Thou art that, but you won't hear it, and you will have to shovel the cow shit for 12 years, and then you might hear it. So Bob was shoveling the cow shit. He was doing all the seva, he was doing practices, he was doing meditations, chantings, dancings, works, and that was his home. He lived there for nothing or close to nothing. The ashram wasn't that commercialized yet, so there wasn't crowds of people. There was no sex scandals and any of those things that came later. He was there early on. And people started coming to him and say, you seem to be resonating with that pure, unadulterated, clean, practice-less non-duality. You should go to Nisargadatta. And he said, nope. I'm loyal to my guru. This is where I am. This is where life brought me. I'm not going anywhere. But this serendipity started multiplying and then coming back door and the window. And then eventually, after hearing it several times, he went to the library when he used to just pick up a book to entertain himself in the breaks between all the austerities that he had to perform there. And the librarian handed him a book, I Am That. He says, just look through it. Just open it and look through it. And he said, shit, that's too much of the coincidences. How long can I resist that if life is really pushing it hard? And he opened the book, he read a couple of paragraphs, the tears rolled in his eyes, and he says, wow. And he found the address at the end of the book, he bought the book, and off he went straight away to Nisargadatta, but it was evening. So he's Nisargadatta's boy opened the door and he says that Daddy is done for a day, come back tomorrow. So he quickly booked himself an accommodation and came back in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. And then he hung in for a few days. Then he had to go back to the ashram. And it became kind of a ritual and a friendship, because Bob would be there anytime and every time he could sneak out, because he still had to live in the ashram. So he would live normally there. And every 10 days, 12 days, he would just disappear for 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days, depends how much he could feel that he can afford to get away with. And stay with Nisargadatta, even though he heard him the very first time that he came the next morning, and that was March 76. Or 75 actually. Gosh, yeah, I have it written in a book. Anyway, Nisargadatta signed the book for Bob, so we have the date in that book. Anyway, he heard him. He heard what Nisargadatta was saying. And he says it was no different to everything he heard before, even from Joel Goldschmidt from the books, or from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the Soham mantra. That was the very same thing. It was just delivered with that sense of frequency that instantly rang the bell, instantly resonated, and it completely landed. It was obvious at that point. And he says, you're not the body, you're not the mind. And at that point, but of course, oh my God, I will never be caught up in that belief in the mind again. It was clear. And of course, as life would have it, the wiring of the whole machinery that, runs those programs of narrating and commenting, as soon as he was out of the door, he got caught up again.
Right.
But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same, because now it was recognized from that free attention, that pure awareness that knew, oh, there is a cutting up happening. It feels like there is a me that got trapped in thinking. But hey, there is no me. I saw it. Let me look again. And over time, all those behaviors, all those habits of engaging with this narrative, especially the self-centered narrative, was easing off. It never dies away because it's a program, it's a software, and it doesn't really matter whether it does or it doesn't. It doesn't matter whether this background yapping voice is speaking or not, if there is no one there to believe it.
I'm curious, Kat, did Sailor Bob get any techniques from Nizar? I always have a hard time saying his name.
Nisargadatta. No, no, he didn't.
Nisargadatta.
No,
So it's
no.
more just
Yeah,
an understanding and being around him.
pure recognition. And yes, he would come back because he loved the man. He couldn't help but love the man. He just felt absolutely wonderful hanging around. And Nisargadatta gave him a pet name of Bhishma because Bob, he would go out of Nisargadatta and any white-skinned person he would meet. And he's not a racist, it's just that everyone else seemed to be, like ingrained in the culture, and Westerners were usually spiritual seekers. So any Westerners he would see in the shops or on the streets, he would basically just say, hey, guys, you came for a spiritual search, you must not miss this guy. So he brought quite a lot of Westerners. And it was just after Morris Friedman passed away. They actually missed each other by a week or so.
Morris Friedman, he was the editor of I Am That, is that right?
That's right. Yes,
Okay.
yes. He transcribed it and published and translated. And yes, so Nisargadatta lovingly called him Bhishma, but he also blamed him for having all the Westerners coming to his home, which wasn't a blame. Of course, he didn't hold it against. When that message shares itself and shines through, there is no desire to have followers or anything. But if anyone needs to hear it, it's the same life that needs to hear it. And there is no objection to it. So he had no objections. He even threw a big goodbye party for Bob when he was leaving. A big-ish picnic for like 25 or 30 people, where they would bring some little foods and they would embrace and cry, both of them, tears in their eyes. And the funny thing, after those 12 months, Barbara, his only love back then, that relationship she ran away to didn't work, and she shown up in Muktananda ashram. And Bob, with his incredible capacity for love and loyalty, started hanging out with her again. And they reunited. They were technically married. They never got divorced. So he took Barbara to Nisargadatta as well. And she heard him too. She heard the message. So there was no more divorces and scandals and running away. They started, really, the marriage improved significantly. They were both crazy at that point. Bob was only a few years sober. She was bashed by the divorce that she had with 4 young children. So there was still a lot of teething going on, and and they did not share that incredible compatibility like that Bob and I did. And she had comparisons, but the marriage got significantly better. And the last 20 years of that 42 years together were really smooth sailing. She did not want to partner him in pointing, but she would contribute occasionally. Like in America, I've seen the videos James Braha recorded. She would say a word here and there, and she would be right on the ball. She was clear with that.
That's quite a story. I'm curious, Kat. Brian and I have interviewed a bunch of people, and I've met a lot of awake people, and I'm always curious how their relationships are, because you're married to a different kind of being. I'm wondering how it was for you being married to a famous teacher, Sailor Bob. What was that like?
It was absolutely amazing, but this was not because he was a famous teacher. It was because life had it this way. It was amazing because I was part of his groups. Like 12 years ago, I was coming as one of the students. I was incredibly inhibited, shy, socially awkward, inferior, having the sense of unworthiness, existential angst. There was something wrong with me. And he was this elevated, enlightened guy. He transcended the human species. He was not the same order of things, and all that other nonsense that usually spiritual seekers come with. Even though he comes right from the start, don't worship the messenger. This is just the meat body. I'm no different than you are. It's the same life animating and beating your heart and looking out of your eyes as it is from me. Forget the messenger. Take the message. There really is no separation. But at that point, I couldn't actually see that what he's saying, oh my gosh, it really is the truth. He didn't lie or exaggerate. There was no difference. Until the time come in my life when I found myself in a point of devastation, when I found myself in a probably the darkest night of the soul, or one of the darkest nights of the soul, when I was so sick of suffering that I came for the individual meeting with him, one-on-one, where I was crying my ass out. And I'm not a person who cries in public. I was self-collected. I was ship's officer. I was really kind of headed together in a way, because spiritual seekers usually have that big sense of longing and loss. So heading it together is a little of a stretch. But I cry my ass out, and I was describing him how terrible it is to feel that you understand it, you're so close to it, and you're still not getting it, and it still hurts so badly. And why is that psychological suffering? I get it, there is no me, but what is suffering? Who is suffering? What the heck? The whole drama of my life was that, I was associated and identified as this self-collected, strong and capable ship's officer. And this is not how I felt that I was. This is not what I experienced myself to be. I experienced myself as something really fragile, really vulnerable, really delicate, really fearing rejection, and really breakable. And those two images just completely didn't fit. It wasn't, the discrepancy between them and the assumption that the way the world is perceiving me is wrong and the way I perceive myself is right. In Bob's presence, in him holding space for me, it completely collapsed. It became completely clear and evident that no image could possibly be right. That my image of myself being the emotional core is as ridiculous as the image of the world of being the performing officer. This was equally, maybe that was a little bit less sentient and that was a little bit more sentient, but nonetheless, they were both conceptual images that exist only when you think about them. And when those collapsed, that was like the tears were still flowing, but now they were the tears of elation, like, oh shit, there really is nothing else to add to it. If there is no conceptual image, there is no questions to ask. There is no questioner to ask the questions. There is nothing ever to need to be worked out through, understood, grasped, embraced, nothing. And now I would say, shit, I never imagined that I would be ever able to say it. But you're no different. You're my equal. You're not my teacher. You couldn't possibly be, because there's no one there and there's no one here. So it is just life speaking to life. And at that point, he was laughing with me. But of course, we didn't know whether this was a temporary opening, which will close down again and the misery will reestablish itself. We didn't know. But I called him next morning, all elated and laughing. You want to hang out? I don't have any other friends who could actually put up with my need for verbal diarrhea of expressing the elation and joy and relief. And he said, sure. And then we started hanging out. And we would hang out daily. And then I would go travel the world, come back and still hang out as equals. There was no need for teaching. I never asked him another question. It was just so obvious how things land in their own place. He would ask me, you give me the spiel. You tell me how, what comes obvious. And of course, at that point, the mind is still preoccupied with some persistent concepts of diets or beliefs that aren't questioned, because this is autopilot. This is a machine. This is like your, like your personal assistant, like your Siri in your telephone or your Chat GPT. It just narrates whatever shows up. If there is an urge in the body, it narrates, this is I am hungry, or I want this. So, but knowing that this is nothing, this is not personal, this is not me speaking, and this is not, it has nothing to do with anything. It's just a function. It's just a program. He would gently bring it back. I say, oh my gosh, I'm having time of my life. Everything is so light. I was supposed to be grieving because there was a heartache and heartbreak after the relationship that collapsed and had no chance to reestablish. And it just didn't even want to be there. And I was in heaven. And then I traveled the world, visit my mom, come back to my ships, and again returned and asked Bob if he wants to hang out. And we continue hanging out. The friendships that we formed, the lightness of hanging out was so natural, so beautiful. The compatibility in that was so natural that at some point, and to a great amusement and a great shock to both of us, the romantic element sipped in, like a typical, what you see on a silly romantic comedies, proximity infatuations. Those programs that run in the system, if you are locked long enough with whoever, because at that point there was no concepts of age gap, and he was more than twice older than I was at that point. I was 41, he was 87. Later on, we caught up on that difference. Later on, he was less than twice my age, because age, time, all of that is relative. But those concepts weren't in the way. So that was so fascinating and so interesting. Like, we looked at it, seriously? Shit, life, are you nuts? And we basically just said yes to life. And life took us into a place in which I moved in with him, and life was just as easy and as flowy and as beautiful. And we got married. Initially, we didn't threaten the Sangha with exposing that information, because just let them slowly get used to me being around. And that was, again, the insight from life, that gentleness, that, people are attached to their concepts. And if you love them, you don't bash them with confrontations like that. So, and again, we were not the doers. It was just what was happening.
Yeah.
That story reminds me, especially when you said that he said it's not about the messenger. It actually reminds me of, it was really a huge moment in my life, the last day in Connecticut. At the very end of the last day, everyone was leaving, and I went up to him. I had asked some questions during the weekend, but I went up to him and said, I'm really sorry to hear that you're going back to Australia and that we're not going to have you here. And he looked at me in the eyes, and it's like his eyes bore through me, and said, "Do you need it?" And I realized, no, it's not about this person outside of me giving me something I don't have. And that was, in that moment, that was a shift.
Beautiful. Yes, that was it. Relentlessly, for the lifetime, he was showing people that they are already what they're aspiring or looking for. There is nothing to be added. There is no one to become. This aliveness, this presence of consciousness, the presence awareness is already there. It's never not here. It might be obscured a little bit by some crazy idea that I am a person, I'm separate, I'm poor, miserable, and inferior, and all that nonsense. But the moment you pause the thought, where is it? You already are that for certain. And that's the only thing that you can ever know or understand for certain. Existence is present. You can't stop existing. It is here. What you are, that's unknowable. And that's pretty clear that it is unknowable. How could you possibly objectify yourself? Where would you be looking from? You're not an object in consciousness. So even when an expression comes, I am the life itself, or I am God, I am absolute, or I am nothing. Those are just an expressions. But truly, that life, that existence cannot know itself at large. It can only know the reflection of itself. And the reflection is not it. So that you are is obvious for everyone. Everyone know that they exist. It is obvious, and that's it. It seems like a small thing, but it is not. It is the heart of the essence, the existence, the aliveness. How small is that? If not for that, nothing else is. That you are, for certain. What you are, you can never know. Because whatever you would know, who would be knowing it? Who would be objectifying the pure subjectivity? It is unknowable. And who wants to know? Who cares? The existence, the being. And this is another beautiful distinguishing part of Bob's teaching. Because we sometimes we have people who come to our Zoom meetings because we encourage everyone to share. That's the point. Hear that life speaking through your vehicle rather than just worship some messenger somewhere. People come from other schools. They come from Ramana Maharshi, who says there is only experiencer, or there is only this, like a singular sort of a subject. Bob was completely collapsing that duality. If there is a subject, there is an object. If there is a seer, there is a seen. If there is a doer, there is a deed. No, in direct experience, no such thing can be experienced. There is a being. Not I and the object of being. There is seeing, hearing, knowing, understanding, the process singular, experiencing, functioning. There is no one who does it. There is no one who switch on the seeing and does the seeing. No, it is a singular capacity, and everyone can actually experience it directly. There is no self doing the seeing. There's no one there behind the eyes looking. It's just seeing. Singular, no division, no separation, no entity.
That's an important distinction. You describe it really well, Kat. I've heard of Sailor Bob throughout the years. I knew that he did these powerful satsangs. I didn't know that he was influenced by AA, and I didn't know if he gave people in the satsangs any particular method other than the satsangs and the teachings. So maybe you can talk a little bit about whether AA influenced him and if there was any particular specific method he would give people, such as meditation.
No, there wasn't. The predicament that there is a method or technique that is going to take you from point A to B, or is going to help you to become something more whole and complete, is the wrong assumption right from the start. If you are already whole and complete, you can't do anything to become what you already are. So any method or technique is going to keep you on the path. It's going to keep you. And then, as much as he was absolutely, bowing down to the beauty of the 12-step program, which he understood as a deflation program for dysregulated, crazy self-centeredness, that program of simulating or imagining the separate self that ran havoc. I am, and he was there. He was there when he came first to the 12-step program. He had no concept of any higher power, any God of his understanding. He says, this is all rubbish, I am all there is, this is, I know it all. I'm just like, I'm a good guy having a bad throat. It's just life piling up. And then this was where the first shift in his life happened when he went to AA, he got sober, he decided, as many of the AA members, that now I'm cured, I can drink, I can control the drinking. And of course, that's impossible. The impulse control is damage. It doesn't work. It's never going to work. So he left AA, and within few months, he was sober for 9 months. And within few months, he was worse than he's ever been before. He was unemployed, unemployable, singing in front of a Prince of Wales, as he says, and other leading hotels to beg for a beer, for the money. And he was singing drunk. He wasn't a performer. No, he couldn't sing. It was the most adorable thing to hear him not being capable of singing and mixing. I loved it. Anyway, he came back. The life brought him back. And he was handed over a book, Sobriety and Beyond, in which the book was written by the Catholic priest who was an alcoholic, in which right in the introduction, or in the even like a subtitles, he wrote that we alcoholics are given a second chance in life. And he realized, shit, that applies. And then it said, how well are you going to use that second chance? And he realized again, wow, how am I going to use it? If not, by finding out if there is a power that is greater than myself that has given me that second chance. And he started a spiritual search. This is when he started looking into Christianity first. It was the closest, all sorts of different sects. He got baptized in different settings. So he even went for the Scientology lesson. He checked Christian Science, all sorts of different things. And then life moved him to the east, towards the meditations, practices, and he's been through those practices for 16 years. And he can't say that they did or didn't anything, because, there is no parallel life in which he would not have those practices. He just says that is how the life story unfolded in this case. And every dream, every life story unfolds differently. In his case, the meditation was included, but then it was transcended straight away when he realized that there is no meditator. There's no one who can gain anything from any practice. And that it can technically be a trap, because, what's wrong with training your focus? It's wonderful. What's wrong with learning few foreign languages or learning how to cook? Nothing. What's wrong with any sort of practice that brings up the skill? But if there is underlying belief that there is a me who is going to achieve something in the future because of the practice that I am performing, then we have tons of wrong assumptions. First of all, there's no me. Second of all, there is nothing to achieve. Third of all, there is no future in which it could possibly be achieved, because the only moment that can ever be experienced is this present moment now. And in this present moment now, you cannot possibly become more alive than you already are. So that was his caveat for all the practices. That's why he would not give any practices. And if people already had the practices, he would say, well, just be mindful. Because that narration software, that program, it will take credit for it. And this is I'm doing it. I'm putting effort. I'm making you closer to the alleged enlightenment state, which is a state of endless pleasure and bliss. So that narrative can basically impede the clarity. It obviously does. It hides the clarity. It's nonsense, which is beautiful from life's perspective. It's not a problem. Life does not need to shine forth clearly through every vehicle. It does not. It has it all. It has the clarity. It has the confusion. Life is already free and uninhibited and expressed in thousands of ways. But from the dream character perspective, it is be or not to be, suffer or not to suffer.
There's a documentary about Sailor Bob. I think it was called There is No Such Thing as Enlightenment. And that idea, is that what you're talking about? Because the idea of enlightenment is something that's going to happen in the future. Is that why? Or what? Or is that what he meant?
That's right. Yes. The doco was made, I think it was, our relationship was very young. I think it must have been like 9 years ago or something that it started, that was filmed. It was probably released. I released it actually when Bob was in the hospital at some point. I kind of wanted to put something on his channel, wanted to give people something to look rather than listen to myself, because I'm no replacement. So I post my talks on my channel. So Bob's channel is Bob's. It's exclusively Bob. And I am a worshiper of my husband. It's not a messenger or a teacher, but I absolutely, I'll be married for him to him forever, because he was the pinnacle of, he was the crown masterpiece of life expression. And I saw him close up, closer than Barbara ever could, because of the compatibility that we shared. So I posted it out fairly recently, that doco, but it was filmed long ago. And there was another doco made very recently that may appear in public at some point. So yes, no such thing as enlightenment. Enlightenment is often objectified as some elated, elevated state that someone can achieve when they try hard enough.
There's like 5 wrong assumptions there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a word, which Bob sometimes played with that word, that enlightenment, it means things get lighter. lighter in a way of like kind of more shiny, but also light means weightless. Suddenly, you know, the heavy weight of wearing that constructed self and being limited and confined by that identity, that imagined identity, which is whether it is an identity of a role that you play temporarily or identity of this emotional core or whatever it is less than totality. It always creates sense of deficiency and incompleteness. So being lighter, it means, you know, if there is no center, there's no self, there's just life, speaking, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and you don't know what you're going to think in 5 minutes from now, but life will provide the thought. So just really open up all those channels for life to shine through. And if there is any constructed self showing up in the picture, just push it out gently aside, you know, thank you, just rest. That's lighter. Life is lighter. Everything that happens, there is no objections because life doesn't object to itself. If the resistance arises, resistance is just a passing weather. It just shows up as, you know, if there is a cold weather, the resistance in the body shakes, puts the jumper. This is just part of the functioning. But if there is no constructed me, that, oh, I don't want it to be this way, I don't want these people to not like me, or I don't want my future to be uncertain. The self-obsession, if that one doesn't hide the lightness of being, then life is just, there is nothing wrong.
And thus the title of his most famous book, which is What's Wrong with Right Now If You Don't Think About It? How's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yes. How clear and how obvious and how verifiable, moment to moment.
Yes.
There's no time when you could find that this is wrong. No time. Even if you are dying of cancer, lying on your deathbed, and you ask that question, what's wrong with right now unless I think about it? You have to think that it is wrong to have cancer and be dying. You have to think that you are even dying to experience dying. Because as he often says, you don't know your first breath, you're not going to know your last.
Do you know, you're obviously a very awake person, Kat. Do you have a sense of what's going to happen with the people who were following Sailor Bob? I guess you did. There were satsangs. What do you think about that, or is it just you're watching to see how it all unfolds?
I watch how it is that everything unfolds, and there's no such thing as awakened person. You wake up from the idea of being a person. So who wakes up?
Yeah,
it's just life getting rid of the veil of illusion of being a person. So there's really no one who wakes up. That's the paradox of it. And this is it, you know, I was a spiritual seeker for a lifetime, and I really, really wanted to get it. I really wanted to wake up. The imagined self, wanted to be present when this enlightened thing happened to me. That's impossible. That I is a veil, that I is imagined, it is illusion. Absence of I is the freedom, is the liberation or awakening from the illusion of self. When no one wakes up, because life is not asleep, it's only been veiled. So there is a lot of people amongst the groups who realize the same thing. Bob was so beautifully effective in pointing out that you are not unaware right now. You are not asleep right now. You are not unconscious. You are already awake. You only think that there is something wrong or something missing or something that will have to happen later for you to become something else. And that's just blah, blah thinking. So there is a lot of people, and I do, as I promised to him, I'll keep showing up. If there are people who want to hear the message, it is light, it is easy, it speaks itself. I don't have to prepare, I don't speak it. It just expresses itself. It's pleasant, really. I mean, if anything, I can tell you the last weeks of Bob's life, Sunday meetings, and he loved the way it was shining through me, because he loved me, and he was really happy that I let it happen. So Sunday meetings and Zoom meetings, he was participating in all of them, and he would hear people expressing that clarity, whatever landed for them. Some people would just have one aspect would completely embraced. For some, it would all open up completely. It gave him such a boost, like a, like a steroid, like an injection of steroids. Suddenly he would just be completely up. Like he was immobile, he couldn't get out of bed. But after Sunday meeting, he would put his legs down on the floor, get the walker and stretch and get up and go to the garden. Incredible how, even bringing the attention back to the source of all attention rather than scattering it around on the dreams and stories and dramas, just really amplifies that life force. So yes, I'll keep showing up. And as long as people want to show up, we will do the exploration. I like the way you title your podcast, because that's how I intuitively understand that too. It's an exploration because nobody's asleep. There might be some confusion amongst some vehicles for life, because every single, seeming dreamy body is just a vehicle of experiencing an expression. There might be some clouding or confusion, some weather going through, but really it is an exploration, bringing the attention back to the fact that we are all already fully aware of existence. And this is the message that you are already. You are that, you are that you are, for certain. So it's exploring, it's bringing it back, and it does bring joy.
Yeah, I definitely can attest to that. Even right now, just hearing you talk about it, and just that turning attention around seems to tap into that joy that's already there, just has been covered up by all of our thoughts and problems, or ideas that there are thoughts that there's such a thing as a problem.
Yes. And I love inviting other people who have that clarity to actually let it speak through. So if I always start the Zoom meeting or the live Sunday satsangs by asking people, please open up, let that instrument tune to that clarity and play your own music, see how it sounds through you. Because that is joy.
I'm very touched by how you speak of it, and the constant reminders that there are our language, and so much of society is always trying to create this individual.
Yeah.
And to hear language where you kind of dissect that is really nice. I wish we had different words or ways of describing things so that it would help us to realize what's obviously our actual experience.
Yes, but it has to be this way. The brilliance of life at large includes the construct of imagined self. If you actually look at that life at large, that life as a totality, animals don't construct the self. They don't have symbolic language. They don't have the language that labels and divides, creates all those distinguishing and computing. So they live in the natural state. Our cats, they know they exist, and they take it for granted. There is no appreciation of the miracle, of the luminosity, of that clarity, of that aliveness, of that amazing gift of existence, because it has always been shining forth. It's totally taken for granted. So the fact that we construct, seemingly it's a software, it's a piece of program that construct that self, that cage of concepts, that idea of me, which is very, very beautiful in a way of having the societies based on the storytelling capacity of humans who join through the storytelling. We are all women, we are all together, or we are all Americans, we are all together, or we are all liberals, or whatever, Democrats, or climate change activists. Those things are not possible amongst those species that do not have that narrative self, that construct the identities. However, of course, the byproduct is the psychological suffering. And then again, a possibility of transcending that psychological suffering by realizing that the role is not who you are. The costume is not who you are. It's a brilliance in the whole thing.
Absolutely. That's so deep. As a matter of fact, I think that after this, I'm just going to listen to that 2 or 3 times.
And
But
find it obvious, finding that, oh shit, of
it
course.
it is. And of course, I don't have to listen to it 2 or 3 times
No,
because
you
right
know
in this
it.
very moment, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're pointing to, and that's what
Yes.
I mean, and it's the same as you. And it's just, Jonathan, it's all looking after all our eyes simultaneously.
Yeah. And that's the beauty, that nothing really have to be learned. Bob often starts the meeting from saying, I can't teach you anything. I can't tell you anything. Because what we're pointing at is common knowledge, is obvious, it's already known, it's already clear. So I'm just pointing and you look for yourself and then it's yours.
Yeah.
It's not a belief-based, like I tell you this like this and you trust me or you believe me and then you liberate it. No.
Well, fortunately, it's
Much
our
simpler.
direct experience all the time. So there's not that far to look.
No, it's never not here. It's just obscured by ideas, which can be very, very easily seen through.
In some ways, I feel like almost everything you said, Kat, is a guided meditation. But maybe we can formally do a guided meditation, whatever that looks like. I assume it'll look like pretty much what you said already. But is that something that works for you?
Sure, let's try it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's do that.
Roll with life. So I guess this is where you relax even further, although the whole talks are aiming at relaxing any sense of identification, any sense of engagement with the grasping mind. But if there is any, and again, this is not an instruction because there is no one to instruct and no one to be instructed. But what all those talks are about is bringing that frequency and hoping that it will resonate. And that resonation naturally happens in the relaxed state. When the mind relaxes and become receptive, then that resonation can actually ring the bell and bring that recognition that what is pointed is already here, that you are already present. You are already conscious. You are not unaware. You are not non-existent. And in that relaxed presence, you may also start appreciating the fact that life is already leaving you, that life is already giving you all the support, is looking after you, is making sure there is another breath in your lungs, is giving itself in you the capacity to see, to experience. There is nothing that you need to do for your heart to beat. Just being, just simple, relaxed sense of presence. And you may trust that life. You may appreciate the fact that it's been looking after you, looking after itself in you up until now. And it will continually provide the thought when the thought is required. You may realize that you can't think the thought. You wouldn't know how to do that. But the thought will appear, just like the emotion will appear, the sensation, the response. When the environment demands the body to respond, the response will appear. There is nothing to worry. There is nothing that needs controlling. All that is ever required is just to be open, present, relaxed, and receptive for that life to do as it does, to do everything as it always does. There is no need for any artificial imagined doer to supervise life. Life is running the planets around the sun. There is no doer of that. Life is growing your hair. There is no doer of that. There is no need to object to life. In that relaxed presence, you may just let it shine. Just find that open space of curiosity. How is the next thing gonna look? How is the next feeling gonna taste? What is the next thought, image, sensation gonna show up? In that space of openness, of curiosity, that space is your essential nature. What does space ever need to do other than just be? And that space is having a cognitive capacity. It can notice. It has the capacity to know. Bob calls it cognizing emptiness. That's not his words, that's been used throughout ages. Cognizing emptiness. And it doesn't mean that there is a you that needs to cognize the emptiness. You are that emptiness. And the capacity to cognize is inherently in that emptiness already. That emptiness without which nothing is. That emptiness, which is a basic screen. That aware presence, presence of awareness, in which everything appears. That presence which does not have any boundaries. In that presence, the body appears. In that aliveness, in that spacious field of knowing, all the dreams, projections, past, future, all of that arises in that which you are. In that pure singularity of existence. You are first. Only then, on that presence, on that radiance, that luminous aliveness, everything else shows up. Everything else is secondary. Doesn't need attending to right now. When it does, it will make itself evident. You can completely rest in trusting that right now, that aliveness is all there ever is. The idea of self can only exist because of that field, open, limitless, timeless, ageless field of knowing. And that idea of self is present sometimes and is absent other times. But you always are. The existence always is. The awareness of existence always is. And that is your essential nature. You need the thought to believe that you are an object. Without the thought, you just are. can't stop it, can't deny it. Even when you dream at night, even when you dream during the daydream, that presence, that isness is always first. Even when the attention goes to the imagined future or to the memories, the isness, the existence is always first. The content of it changes, but the existence is always there. Even if the content is a memory of being a child or imagination of being a dying old man or woman, that presence is first. And it is right here. Everything happens in that presence, and the presence is first. Relaxing into it, staying completely one with that field, with that space, as that space, is the easiest and most effortless and most natural state. That's the natural state. State of openness and curiosity, where there is no doing required. And even if the mind is hyperactive, that presence is not touched or obscured. Even if there is chatter and obsessing happening, that presence is still clear and untouched like the sky. Even if there is a weather of thunderstorms or cyclones, we're having a cyclone here, the sky is untouched, and you are that sky. If the weather shows up and moves through, there is always, and always is now, a possibility to relax back to that space-like awareness. And nothing can threaten it. Nothing can touch it. If there is relaxed attention, the connection is never broken. The life is always underlying and underneath. That space is always there. Even if all of the attention is scattered around, you as life are untouched. Nothing needs to be done to achieve it. It is already here. Just relax and recognize you are not unconscious. You are not asleep. You are not non-existent. The existence is there. And without the thought of being a body, without the thought of having a face, can you experience any limitations to that sense of presence? Without the idea, can you experience time? Can you experience past and future? In this alive moment of being that open field, a space, can you experience any boundaries, separation, and limitation in any other way than just imagining? And those imaginings are just floating through that space. Can that space ever be touched by mental images, concepts of time, of space, of location? you are forever free. Even if there is an image or idea that you are not, you cannot not be that field, that life. In direct experience, you are that field. Whatever appears in your gaze is the content. Whatever appears in the imagination is the content. You are prior to that. Whatever appears in the field of hearing, whatever sound appears, the mind can tell you, oh, this is far away, and this is nearer, this is closer. They all appear in that which you are. You are, and the sounds appear in it, in that field that you are. They don't appear in your head or outside the head. You are, and everything else appears.
That was amazing. There's you gave no place for me to land.
No need. This me is redundant. It's never done a thing. It's just a construct.
Yeah.
The utter clarity of that is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I never do guided meditations, but I never say no to life either.
Well, that was, I mean, I was listening to that and saying, yes, this is it. I want everyone to hear this. I can't wait for everybody to just hear this and just look inside and just experience it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so beautifully experienceable. It's so beautiful just in this, experienceability.
Yeah.
You don't have to have special powers. You don't have to be, well, you might need to speak English, but that's about it.
But it's so available. It's already here. It's just so reliable. And it's just, you're right. It's noticeable. It's just sort of covered up by, well, all that thinking.
By the dreaming. Yeah, the dreaming. Just like at night, the mind creates a little dream character who has the eyes open and is walking around, climbing mountains and experiencing the world which doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. We're dream characters.
Yeah.
Paul Hederman calls this the action figure. The Brian, I call it the Brian character, or the cat character. He calls it the action figure, the dream character.
So, Kat, how can people find out more about your dream character? Is there a website that they can learn more?
No, not really. I mean, I don't really have any investment in self-promotion or anything like that.
But if they want to know, like access some of what you or Sailor Bob put forward.
Sailor Bob, because I totally want to preserve his style because it's been so effective for me and so many others. So I basically just post links to our Zoom meetings on SailorBobAdamson.com. And I'm going to write another book of his teachings, which is predominantly my book, but he is quoted largely in all the ways because, as I say, I have the worshiper in me. I worship my husband because he was the pinnacle of a masterpiece of the universe creation. He was just the most beautiful, beautiful. I mean, of course, look, you can look at the piece of fern or a rose and you fall in love with the whole universe in it because the universe is holographic. And I just happened to look that closely at this pattern called Sailor Bob. So that's how I just worship the whole universe in him, not as a teacher, because he was my teacher for an hour and a half.
Well, I'm so glad we got a chance to celebrate him and to share this with everybody. I'm so grateful that that you could come on and so clearly and lovingly and effortlessly share it all.
It's an honor. It really is. It's an honor to be in a position when you can actually let it speak rather than sit in that confined idea of being poor, miserable, devastated, little worthless piece of me.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the Sunday gatherings go on, but I assume one has to be in Melbourne to.
Yes, we also have Zoom meetings. We have Zoom meetings twice a week for people from Europe. For Americans, it's a little bit too far away. And I asked a friend, he's been talking on the meetings as well, Tazi, to handle the spiel and the introduction of the Zoom meeting that happens for the American people on Saturday afternoon. Yes, that is Sunday afternoon for you guys, Monday morning for us. It is our dear friend, American Julia, who twisted Bob's arm about 2 or 3 years ago that she wants the meeting, the Zoom for her countrymen. So she asked Tazi to do the introduction.
Mhm.
So there is a meeting in Sailor Bob style that is happening, and all the informations are on the website. Also, for those who resonate with Tazi and his style and just feel that you vibe with, with resonation with a guy who is beautiful and very generous, they can tune in and email him, ask for the individual mentoring. And I have people who tune in and resonate with my style of pointing, and they catch up with me for individual. We don't charge for it because I haven't been charged for it. And my situation is still fairly stable, so I don't really need to make it to a business, and I hope I never will have to do that.
Mhm.
Although I have no concepts about it, people have so much of the heated ideas about, oh, they shouldn't be, or they should be. Well, there's no one there. There's just live directing, like people who like big guns, like Eckhart Tolle or someone who will have 1,000 requests per day if he didn't put the high price on it. Of course, is life regulating it. He's not the doer.
Mhm.
But I'm in that beautiful, comfortable situation that right now I still have my social support paying my pension for another couple of months, and I don't need to seek work. So I do have few calls every day, and I do enjoy it, and I do Zoom groups and also enjoy it. As I said, it's a privilege. Where life is going to take it next, I have no idea. But for now, all the information is on sailorbobadamson.com.
Great. And it's our privilege too to have you.
And to have all our listeners and do this podcast. You said it very well. We, Brian and I, really feel honored that we get to do this too. Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure. It's an honor, really. And thank you. And thank you for being open and for being receptive and for asking questions and for, reflecting back that clarity, because that's the only thing that matters, really. That's the only thing that amplifies that energy. And it's a
So
joy.
to our listeners, we always like to end with the words, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Yep. Keep exploring. It's fun. It's joy.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.